Jamie Strauss Park will be moderating this morning. Good. Once again, I'm going to call you 3 at a time, and I'm going to have the first person I'm calling come to the podium. The other 2 sit there. Make sure you fill out a card, and I'll pick that up from you.
I'm concerned about this project because I'm a commercial fisherman, been a retired commercial fisherman, and you people need to know that when they put in the Encalco dock and when they put that refinery dock back in the 60s, the first victim was the eelgrass. Foreign ships empty their bilges at Cherry Point, and when they emptied their bilges, the eelgrass died off, and the largest herring run in the world went away. It never came back. It affects all my brothers and sister fishermen because we're losing our resource out there. Another problem I have with this is that those freighters, those extra 300 they want, they're gonna burn, they burn bunker fuel, which is the worst fuel to burn. And what comes out of the stacks every day out of one ship is equivalent to 16,000 cars on the road. So I want to end with this. This is from my brother Cree Nation. It's a prophecy from the 1800s. And they say, when all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air you breathe is unsafe, only then will you discover you cannot eat money.
And finally, I would respectfully request that the EIS include comprehensive study of the long-term and global implications of coal combustion. The proposal to haul and ship coal from the Powder River Basin has one end and one end alone. The coal is to be burned. How will the combustion of coal exported via the Gateway Pacific Terminal exacerbate the problems of climate change and ocean acidification?
As I'm a musician, I'm currently touring from eastern Montana all the way following the route of the coal train back to here and down to Coos Bay. And I met with 5 ranching families in eastern Montana who were fighting the coal train, fighting the coal mines. Went through all the cities are organizing the whole route, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, wondering when their hearings are going to be. 2 days ago I played Yakima. The Yakima Nation has come out against coal export. The Lummi Nation has come out against coal export. Going from the ranchers to here, let's just put it this way, both the cowboys and the Indians are against coal export. We've got them surrounded. We're going to beat them on this one, friends. We're going to beat them on this one. And the reason is, I can give you, there's a long history in America where the people stand up to big corporations and to bureaucracies. When our elected officials say, oh, there's no way we can do this. In Skagit Valley, when they wanted to put a nuclear plant there in the 70s, 2 mayors and thousands of people stood up. We beat that nuclear power plant. In Kauai, when they wanted to put in the Inter-Island Super Ferry, 1,500 Kauaians showed up there and blocked the dock. 200 people on surfboards circled that boat. The boat went back to Honolulu and never came back. They defeated the federal government and the state of Hawaii. And most recently, in Nebraska, with the Keystone Pipeline, the conservative Republican farmers and ranchers said, no way is that pipeline coming through our aquifer, because they understood that it would ruin their way of life and endanger their way of life. And we, in our region, we have an opportunity to do something wonderful for the world. And if we hang together, if we're firm, we will defeat this. Thank you.
When we consider the no action alternative, it's truly a no action alternative. I want to know what's going to happen to our herring stocks if this is not built. What's going to happen to our tourist industry if we don't start to ship coal through our town? What's going to happen to our property taxes, to our local businesses, to our waterfront redevelopment if we indeed succeed at stopping this terminal? That's what I want to know, so I can choose that instead of a coal port.
These are not good jobs. This is not mitigatable. They are not mitigatable.
I am so concerned about the liabilities regarding this project. I want you to determine the liability at every step of this process. Number one, when the coal is still in the ground, who owns that coal? Is it Peabody Mine? Is it the taxpayers? And when the coal leaves Powder River Basin on the train, is it Peabody? Is it GPT? Is it SSA? Is it Burlington Northern? Is it the financial backers at Goldman Sachs? Who owns the coal? Who is liable? When the coal arrives at Cherry Point, who owns the coal? When it gets off the train and it goes on the earth, who's liable for that coal or for an accident at that point? When it gets from the earth onto the vessel and is being transferred, who owns the coal? Who's liable at that particular moment? On the vessel, as it's going out to sea and it's in Puget Sound, and there's one of these catastrophic accidents that we're all so terrified about, who's liable? Is it the vessel or is it the owner of the coal? And who owns the coal? And once it's out at the sea, in the big ocean, and there's another accident, who owns the coal? Who's responsible for mitigating and repairing all the potential damages that could happen from this coal? Who owns the coal and where is the liability?
Main concern that I have is one that I don't think has been addressed, and it has to do with the holding capacity of the anchors that are attached to these ships. These ships are 1,000 feet long. The anchors that they use are all cast in China. The anchors have been known to break apart under stress.
We were coming from Bellingham to Salt Spring Island, just crossing Rosario Strait, coming out of a total whiteout. And as our boat was coming across, coming out of this whiteout, we looked out to the right, and there was this pitch black mushroom cloud, and it was a coal cloud. And we watched this black cloud dissipating into grayer and grayer and bigger coming right toward our boat, and watching it going all over the Sound, Rosario Sound.
And we see in the United States that coal is not the healthiest thing to use for heat, and why are we then thinking it's okay to send it to someone else and make a negative impact on somebody else's health?
Our coal ships are Cape class. They're the largest ships employed by mankind, and they navigate the difficult waterways of San Juan Islands. There will be 487 of them, making 970 transits every year through the Puget Sound waterways. We have to study the impact of this kind of level of traffic on our salmon fishing industry. Our salmon fishing industry is a $13.5 million industry in Markham County.
We're talking about up to 3,000 unit coal trains per year, each one at least 1.5 miles long. We're talking about almost 500 very large bulk carriers per year, each one somewhere between 700 and 1,000 feet long. And by the way, these very large bulk carriers burn a fuel that is much dirtier than coal itself.
Industrial noise and its effect on breeding of mammals between here and the Powder River Basin. Although the railroad tracks will be cutting up the habitat between here and there, animals will be affected from the noise, and animals are averse to industrial noise, and this cuts their breeding habitat into smaller areas, and we spend a lot of money on rehabbing wolves or salmon and improving the ecology in these areas, and it seems rather odd to be spending taxpayer dollars on these things and then interrupting them at the same time. Thank you.
Northwest waters are home to thousands of migratory birds. An environmental impact assessment must include waterfowl, shorebirds, and raptors, since the rail lines are so close to the shoreline. If the Dunlin and duck flocks are spooked by the increased trains, what will the peregrines and bald eagles eat? Eelgrass provides habitat for small fish. And great blue herons. The future needs to be assessed. And how about exporting solar panels? We make them right here in Bellingham.
Now I want to finish with a quote from the National Environmental Policy Act, which created the EIS process in 1970. And it says that the nation may fulfill the responsibility of each generation as trustee of the environment for succeeding generations. That's our job.
We can do better than transporting 46 metric tons by rail across 4 states, disrupting 121 big cities and small towns, and transecting agricultural areas and ranches. We can do better than destroying Montana and Wyoming with mountaintop coal removal. We can do better than adding over 900 ship transits through the delicate areas of Harrow Strait.
A single overpass, I'm told, can cost 10 to 50, that's $50 million, the vast majority of which would land on taxpayers' shoulders. One of our citizens recently asked a terminal proponent if the railroad or terminal builders would fund such needed upgrades, and the response was, we'd be insane to do that.
As far as the noise pollution, we can't even talk when the trains go by.
Without the eelgrass beds, juvenile salmon have no protective shelter and could die. And Pacific herring lose their spawning ground and could die. Seems like a small thing, but the Pacific herring are food for salmon. Salmon are food for orca whales and people. Without the eelgrass and herring, the entire food chain will be seriously jeopardized.
The impact of having North America's largest coal terminal on the sustainability ethos that draws students to Northwest Washington, to our degree programs, and the resulting investment of millions of dollars into our local economy. I can't imagine offering a divinity degree on the Las Vegas Strip. I also can't imagine the proposed coal terminal or the train that will feed it making it into college brochures anytime soon. Thank you.
I'm a teacher, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I would like to talk about the unavoidable negative and adverse impacts on our individual and community mental health if this coal project goes through. Unfortunately, these impacts seem to be the unavoidable and inevitable consequences built into the paradigm of a self-serving corporate capitalist system of whom BNSF, Goldman Sachs, SSA Marine, and the coal companies are charter members. This corporate profit system depends on our alienation from nature, our alienation from each other, our alienation from ourselves, and our alienation from our own experience. This is the definition of mental unhealth, if not downright insanity. The cumulative impacts of such a model actively works against mentally healthy communities.
Recently, we were shocked to hear that our drinking water in Lake Whatcom harbors the horrifying evidence of heavy metal contaminants directly attributed to coal burned in China.
I've seen that across this country, there's one issue that my generation is willing to risk their life for, and that issue is climate change. That is the issue that we are going to be fighting for, and it's our generation's fight. We live in a global generation, we're part of a greater global community, and we're sympathetic towards the needs of those all around the world. We see that our choices have serious implications around the world. The costs of the Gateway Pacific Terminal wouldn't be seen the first day when we extract that coal from the Powder River Basin. They wouldn't be seen the first year when we freight that coal to Bellingham or to one of the proposed cities, and we ship that to China. They wouldn't even be seen when my children are growing up. They'll be seen generations and generations to come, and there's no way for us to tell what they could be. But I urge you to look globally, to think of the ultimate implications and the contributions that the Gateway Pacific Terminal would have for climate change in our globe. Because I believe that if you look at the true costs of extracting, transporting, and burning that coal, you'll see that the costs and the risks are entirely too high.
I do not believe that it is in the interest of Bellingham, Whatcom County, the state of Washington, or the United States to mine coal in Montana and ship it thousands of miles by rail, then export it to China to come back to us as air pollution and cheap consumer products that we don't need. We are not some third world country desperate to mine our natural resources and sell them to some industrial giant because that is the only card that we have to play. We can and must do much better than that.
Comments are from the perspective of a cultural creative, which doesn't necessarily fit your box of 4 categories, but that's kind of my point. When we imagine, we figure out ways to fulfill our dreams. The idea of shipping coal to Asian markets is not a dream of humanity.
I just want to start on a global sense that healthy ecosystems are vitally more important for sustaining life on Earth than healthy economies.
In Googling most of the coal terminals around the planet, two facts stick out. Fact number one, the vast majority of coal terminals greatly expand their capacity once they're built. After they're built, they double in size, they triple in size. You can go on the web, you can see it. Tawasin has doubled in size, Prince Rupert, most every one of them. So I would like to ask the scoping committee to scope what happens if we jump from 18 extra trains a day to 36 extra trains a day. Is there a cap on how big this terminal can get?
My dad would always say to me when I was young, there might be a shortage of jobs, but there's never a shortage of work. And the work that we have at hand right now, our generation, all of us living right now, is to clean up the mess that we've and our forefathers have created. They didn't do it because they thought, they didn't do it because they were trying to waste our resources or pollute our waters or pollute our airs. They did it because it was a job, and they had the job and they didn't know better. We know better now, and we have to act on what we know.
I am concerned about the increased risk of oil spills in the Salish Sea that these almost 1,000 more bulk carrier ships, some the size of the Empire State Building, will bring to our region. I am hoping that you'll study not only the increased risk of oil spills from the GPT ships, but also from the other proposed export terminals in our region, and making that a cumulative impact study of oil spill risk in our region.
I want to address an impact that I haven't heard addressed yet. It's not really a direct impact, but it's an indirect one that I think is relevant still, and it will be caused by people like myself who do not believe that the environmental impact assessment process itself is legitimate because it is corrupt, and who will take matters into their own hands if this terminal is in fact put into operation, and stop it using any means necessary, whether that means putting their bodies on the line or physically dismantling infrastructure. Now, this might be a surprise to some of you, but I'm going to tell you why it shouldn't be. We've had an environmental movement, a modern environmental movement, for the past 40 years. If we put the beginning at Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, published in 1962. We've had environmentalism in this country for half a century, and yet every living system on the planet is in decline. And the rate of decline is accelerating, and there has not been a single peer-reviewed scientific article that's been published in the past 30 years that contradicts that statement. What's happened over and over again is that environmental impact assessment is basically just environmentalists tutoring developers and industrialists on how to develop and industrialize in a more friendly way. And that's not possible, okay? Things are getting worse. Where are the migratory songbirds? Where are the salmon? Where are the pronghorn antelope of the West Coast? There are less and less forests, less and less fish in the oceans. We should not be surprised that people are about to take more militant actions when these things are being proposed and built. So I wanted a matter of public record that I, for one, will not come out and speak against people who take matters into their own hands to stop these things. Thank you.
I'd like to reiterate what Dr. Frank James so eloquently said in the beginning, that this process really is a sham, and we are terrified in Birch Bay.
Every year, the cost of promoting climate change denial gets higher and higher for the carbon industry. Someday, that cost will get so high that they will say they've had enough. And they will pack up their jobs, they'll pack up their profits, and they will leave town. But they'll leave us with an immense cleanup. Very expensive, huge cleanup, globally and locally. 100 years from now, our great-grandchildren will still be paying for the few jobs we may see today. We don't want those kind of jobs. Thank you.
I would like to encourage you to look at the cumulative impact of all the coal facilities on the West Coast on vessel traffic and ballast water in particular. Those are two areas I actually have a lot of expertise in. With all those ships, when you start tracking where they're going to go, they all go up the West Coast, Pacific coast, at best the BC coast, up to one little teeny pinhole pass called Unamak Pass in the Aleutians. And then they go on the inside of the Aleutians by Bering, the Bering Sea and Bristol Bay, thousands of miles or so out to the other side of the Aleutian Islands, and then they come down to all of Asia, China, Japan, everything. That's the same thing for the tar sand ships are coming down from proposed Burnaby, quadrupling the number of tar sand shipper ships, with the ones coming from Kitimat, Prince Rupert. They all go to the same place. Turns out the impacts from these vessels could be devastating to all the Pacific Northwest salmon, because all those salmon, after they spawn, even all the way down the Columbia River and further south, all the smolts go up to the Gulf of Alaska. The research is in, 10 billion smolts a year go there. If there's a collision between these gigantic coal ships and these tar sand ships in that area or anywhere along the way, which is very likely that kind of traffic being increased up to about 2,500 ships a year, it's going to be devastating.
My concern is the cumulative effect of the pollution levels of the BP refinery, the aluminum smelter Alcoa, and the proposed coal terminal on the local inhabitants and the environment. The geographical proximity of these three entities needs to be considered. The cumulative effect of having these three large polluting industries within just a few miles of each other has to be addressed together when considering building the largest coal terminal in the United States in the same area. Anything short of this would misrepresent the true impact of the environment on that proposed coal terminal would create. Each one of these industries may be just below the critical level for a known adverse health impact by itself, but the combined impact of all three of them may significantly endanger human and animal health, as well as the natural environment, soil, water, food resources, etc. When there are more than two entities, a system ceases to behave in a classical way and becomes known as a nonlinear or chaotic, meaning that small effects can magnify greatly throughout in a chaotic fashion. A linear system implies that small causes produce small effects. By contrast, a nonlinear system implies that small causes potentially produce large and unpredictable effects. Consider, for instance, the cumulative effects of the deposits of heavy elements and other toxins coming from all three sources on both the human population and the entire ecosystem. Pollutants travel great distances on the wind and groundwater, sea currents, etc., and they build up in living systems. What are the long-term effects as well as the short-term risks and impacts? The cumulative effect of exponential buildup and accretion of toxicity in various environmental systems must be taken into consideration when estimating the environmental impact.
This scoping process, with all due respect, is a pretense of interest in public opinion. Projected corporate profit trumps whatever negative impacts we enumerate from local to global. Let's not forget that the one and only goal of this entire Gateway Pacific enterprise is massive corporate profit at any price.
Well, I've been an environmental activist for 30 years or more, and I can say I am amazed and disgusted that in 2012 a project such as this is even being considered at all.
Listen carefully, because I don't know what I'm going to say, or which way I'm going to say it. There's so many things here. Basically, don't be railroaded.
I'm here today to oppose this coal terminal export they want to put on my sacred lands. We need to look at it like this. We wouldn't go and dig up the Vatican and put a coal terminal right there. That's sacred lands to Catholics. We wouldn't go to Israel and dig up the sacred walls of Jericho and put a coal terminal there, or so on and so forth. Go to sacred sites that have to do with Buddhism or Islam. No way is that even an option. So it hurts my heart and it tears my people down to know that this is even an option. Why is this even an option? Why is this open for discussion? It should not be. So my people, we say no. This is not negotiable. This is not going to happen. I represent my people in a good way. I'm an Indian activist at the beginning of my journey, and I appreciate this opportunity to come here and express my thoughts and my feelings on what this will do. In 1887, the Dawes Act happened, and over 90% of my people had died due to biochemical warfare. This is going to take a chunk of our culture, of our identity.
We have had higher instances of autism, bipolarism. We have had schizophrenia in children. We have had behavioral control problems, ADD, ADHD. And the only thing that people can come up with is that something is wrong in our environmental system, because something is happening to the neurology of our kids in this country, and nobody seems to give a rip, and I hope you do.
I think the result of my tabulation, I wasn't going to talk, but the result of my tabulation was that everything's connected to everything else. If this happens, should it not be under a port authority that has accountability to the people rather than a private corporation that is only accountable to its shareholders? Thank you.
When you go into your heads and your hearts to figure out how extrapolated this EIS is going to be, I would offer that you would take the time to really be able to put yourself in the place of everyone and everything that's going to be affected. I myself, I don't have any children of my own, but I am an auntie to a few, and I'm sure that you all have children too, and I'm afraid that not only will this project affect their direct physical health, but I am also afraid it will affect their very belief in us as an example for them, as a body of adults that they look up to. And I feel as though we do not want to be setting the example for our children that it is okay to decimate our land in the long term just for a short-sighted amount of jobs and benefits. And I feel like perhaps that will help you to all make a more informed decision as to the scope of the scoping process if you're able to really connect with what this will mean to not just the present moment but to the future. Thank you.